I've been doing internet on the road for many years, and I've heard a lot of myths about like how to get internet and what to use to get internet. And so I thought I'd shoot a video and explain some of the most common myths that I've heard and kind of explain my experience with them and to give you a good idea on how to get great internet on the road and how to dispel some of those myths. The first one that a lot of people tell me is that when they go out on the road and they plan on working or traveling or something, they're gonna use their phone for the internet and it's going to work okay. So when I'm usually talking to people, I say, all right, there's different kind of levels, right? So you start at like level 1, and that's your phone, and you kind of get this experience as you get out on the road. So once you get out there, you get to your first spot, you turn your phone hotspot on, and you're using it, and then it works, and then maybe you go to another spot and it's like, all right, this isn't really working. And by the time you've been like a couple weeks in, you quickly figure out that the phone is just not meant to be your internet device. It just wasn't built to do that. Now, the best way that I could describe it is if I tell people like, do you remember what phones were first like when they first came out? They were big because there weren't cell towers all over the place. They had to have bigger antennas in order to reach those farther cell towers. But what happens is our phones got smaller and smaller. They started putting towers all over the place, so we didn't have to reach so far in order to get a signal. So when you're out on the road, you're naturally farther away from those towers, so your phone is just gonna struggle when you try to use it for internet. On top of that, your phone is meant to be used as like a device, and you do stuff on it, but whenever you turn on the hotspot, you can quickly tell that it really wasn't designed to do it. While in most cases it does work, you can tell like if you put one device on and then add another one, it just quickly breaks down. It just doesn't work. On top of that, a lot of the carriers would call it unlimited data, but as soon as you turn on your hotspot, it goes into a whole different bucket, which they call hotspot data. And they only usually give you a certain amount of gigs, and then after that, it just completely stops working. So the carriers don't want you using your phone as a hotspot. That's why they sell other things like hotspots, which I'll get to these in just a second as well. So in my experience, a cell phone only worked for just a little bit, and I've quickly found myself looking for something else. Which leads to my second myth, which is hotspots that you get from your provider are good enough. They're not. If you look at this hotspot, you can tell that this hotspot is pretty similar in size to my phone. Now they make these because they're simple and they're cheap, but the antennas, the device itself is just not very good. So if you've ever used one, you could say, well, this is probably a small step up from your phone, but it kind of acts just like your phone. And that's basically why, because it's a phone without a screen. So these were meant to be used in town, close to towers, and for, if you ask me, for a limited time, because they just struggle all the time. I used one pretty consistently when we were first out on the road, and it would seem like every now and then I had to go and reboot it or shut it down or something just because the internet said it was there, but it just wasn't working. The actual electronics behind these just don't lend themselves well to sharing internet with other devices. The main thing though, with this and with the phone, is it really comes down to the antenna. When you don't have a really good antenna and you don't have a solid connection to the tower, your stuff just doesn't work very well. Which leads me to my third myth, which is whenever you buy a device that looks like this, a lot of these are being sold on Facebook from different companies that say something similar like this can attach to any tower, yada yada. They will sell you this and be like, all you have to do is plug it in, and then, you know, you quickly find out, well, these aren't that good either. Now, the benefit to these and things like this is that the CPU in it, the power, the equipment, it's like a better computer. So it does work better as like sharing internet and everything, but when it comes down to it, the antenna part still isn't very different. So this is one of the antennas that's on something similar to this, and you can just kind of break it apart and see the antenna inside it is still very, very small. When you compare it to the hotspot, you can tell it's like probably has a very similar size antenna, it's just in a little different shape. So my advice for you, anytime you see some piece of equipment that's being sold to you, especially if you see an ad for it or something, take a look at the equipment itself, because the antenna really tells the whole story, if it's gonna work or not. You've probably seen a lot of YouTubers out there showing you their different internet setups. I have one that I made years ago showing people how to get great internet on the road. It all came down to the antenna. A lot of the YouTubers will say, all right, I got one of these, and in order for this to work, I have a 7-in-1 antenna that we go and put up on the roof. That is like the thread that runs through everything when you're looking for internet far away, or when you're looking to do internet wirelessly, and I'm talking satellite as well, which I'll get to that in just a second. Whenever you look at the stuff that you have, the ads, like they'll have little pucks and everything that says, oh, I just plugged it in and I got great internet. That's just like this, and it's basically just like your phone. And the equipment is what's gonna make you the biggest difference when it comes down to the quality and the speed that you're going to get from your internet connection. Now the next one's a little bit different because this is a myth that I hear, but I hear people saying like right away that they tried it and it didn't work, and that is campground Wi-Fi. In my experience, you cannot rely on campground Wi-Fi simply because a lot of the places that you get it, they're trying to share a very small internet pipe with a lot of people. And as soon as you put a lot of people on their small internet pipe, it just slows down and it is no good. I will just basically leave that one there because you've probably tried it. There are probably a couple places that you go where the internet is pretty good Wi-Fi wise, but a lot of them are gonna charge you for it anyway because that's basically how they can afford to pay for either the really large internet pipe that they need, or they need people to pay so that not everybody's on it, so whoever's on it actually gets a good experience. So this fifth myth is that satellite is the only reliable option. And I always push back on this one a little bit because most of the time I talk to people about this, I ask them, well, what have you tried? And they said, well, I tried my phone, right? And so that leads me back to what I was saying before. Phones, hotspots, things like this, even things like this, have such bad antennas in them, as soon as they get out to places that we want to be, they don't work, and they don't work consistently. That's why all of those YouTubers talk about that external antenna. It makes such a big difference that you can actually go from not working at all to working very well and having a very stable connection just with your antenna. Now, as it relates to satellite being the only option, a lot of those people said, well, if my phone doesn't work, I guess satellite is just what I'm gonna have to settle with. And while satellite does work really well, and I use it myself, it's not the end all with connections. Satellite can struggle in different ways. If you are under trees, if you are in some really bad weather, or just even the nature of satellite, because the satellites are moving all the time, if you have connections that need to be really stable, satellite can be kind of tricky. So just today here in Tennessee, we had some weather going through and we've run speed tests on the satellite, and while at one point it's pretty good, we're getting about 50 or 60 down, another point it's not so good, it's about 16 down, and then another time it's about 3 down, right? So it varies quite a bit based on cloud cover, where the satellites are, and when you have things that need really dedicated connections like Zoom calls, Teams meetings, things like that, you want a very stable connection. So while satellite may work in a lot of places, especially if you get somewhere out west where there's not a lot of population and there's not a lot of trees, it doesn't mean it's the only option. A lot of times I tell people, if you can mix multiple sources together, you actually get the best of both worlds, especially when you use good equipment that goes along with cellular. Another myth that I used to hear, which I don't hear that much anymore, is all about cell boosters. I have a whole video that I did years ago about cell boosters and why they were kind of falling out of graces back then. It's even more so now. Cellular boosters were built for like 1G, 2G, possibly 3G. They were built when cell towers were super far away, and they gave you a better antenna so that you could pull that signal in and use it for voice. The problem is that now our cell phones and hotspots and everything have multiple antennas to them, and those multiple antennas help us get a better connection to the tower. Whenever you use a cell booster, it limits it down to one antenna, one connection to the tower, and it just doesn't work that well for data. So what a lot of people are seeing is that when they hook up their booster, they plug it in, they get tons of bars, but they're like, why isn't my streaming working? Why do I always get the circle? All of that. The bars don't necessarily mean that you're gonna get great service. It would be like you going up to a radio and just turning the volume up and just be super loud, right? The music wouldn't be good quality, it would just be super loud noise. That's basically what a booster does when it tries to bring in a signal from outside and then boost it inside. So what I do tell people is that they do work pretty decently for voice, but if you try to use them for data, they quickly stumble and it will usually lead you to looking for something else. That kind of leads me into my next myth, which is more bars equal faster internet. That's not necessarily the case, especially if you use older equipment. Like if you have 4G modems or something, you might have a pretty decent signal from the tower, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have good speed. I'll use Quartzsite as an example. If you go to Quartzsite, you get hundreds of thousands of people that show up in the desert, and it overwhelms the cellular connections. And so if you have an older modem like a 4G, you might be sitting right underneath a tower and can't get anything. In order to get good signal and good speed from those towers, you have to have all the available technology to you. We're talking 4G bands, 5G bands, so it can give you a connection that has the best chance of using bandwidth. What I have found is that when you have a great antenna and a modern modem, you get a good connection to the tower, and then the tower actually prefers talking back to you. So think of it like this. If you were out in the desert and you had somebody super far away from you and they were yelling at you like, hey, come over here, you could hardly hear them and you wouldn't want to enter into a conversation with them, right? It's just too far away. It's too much work on your end in order to make that conversation. Now, if that person had a good connection to you, like let's say they had a bullhorn and you had a bullhorn too, and you could say, hey, I can see you over there, right? And you could hear them and they can hear you, they would much prefer talking to you like that versus if you had like a noisy connection going on. So when you have a good antenna hooked up to your equipment, it's like you have a great bullhorn that you can use that says, hey, I'm over here, and the tower's like, we're willing to work together. There was times where people would come up to us in courtside and say, hey, I can't get anything on my phone, and I would say, well, this is actually my system. I have a great connection to the tower. We're streaming. The boys have been in there streaming all the time. It's a little slower, sure, but we're still able to stream because the tower prefers talking to us versus phones. So you can kind of see the thread that's going on through this whole conversation. It comes down to the equipment and the antenna that you use. This is super important for cellular because cellular does go through things like walls and trees and all that. So we think, oh, because it goes through the trees, we don't necessarily need to follow the rules with antennas. Now, if you think of it like this, satellite has very specific rules that you have to follow. If I had a satellite in here trying to reach up to the satellites up there, there's no way that this would work because I need to follow that rule with that antenna. So I have to put it out there. I have to make sure that it has a very clear view of the sky. Nothing can be in front of it. If so, it's just not going to work. It's going to break down pretty quickly. If we follow the same rules with cellular, we can get much, much better performance and use from it. And because cellular has been out for so long and there's a lot of providers and a lot of towers out there, it's a much better value to you. You can get an unlimited cellular plan for like a fraction of the cost that you can get an unlimited satellite. So what I like to tell people is that if you can mix the two together, that gives you the best chance of having the best connection pretty much anywhere you go in the whole country. So the way that I typically use internet while we're out on the road is I will mix our cellular with one of our antennas with a satellite. And we have unlimited on the cellular and we have 50 gigs on the satellite. So by doing that, we are paying less than somebody with just satellite alone, but we have two sources of internet. So I can park under trees, I could be out in the middle of the desert. It doesn't really matter where I am. I'm using my cellular as primary, and because I have great equipment, it works really, really well for me. And I have a very steady, very consistent connection pretty much all the time. Now, if I happen to go somewhere like Yellowstone where there's just no towers, then I could use my satellite, kick it in, use it as long as I need to, and then go fail back over to cellular. Now, the nice thing about satellite providers and like even our data plans that we offer, we can change things month to month. So if I was on the road for many months and like, let's say I was in Yellowstone for tons of months, right? Let's say I was working there, I could actually just pause the cellular and go full-time on the satellite and just use that as primary. Or if we were in a reverse, like if we were just somewhere where we knew cell signal was going to be great all the time, we could pause satellite and just go cellular, save tons of money every month because we're not paying the highest premium possible for unlimited internet. We have unlimited on a great value cellular, and then we just use the satellite as needed. So those are the biggest myths that I have run into while doing this internet stuff. Our family runs the InstaConnect system, which is a system that we put together after being on the road many years, trying out all kinds of things like phones, hotspots, routers, all of that. We put together what we think is a great system that can help people not only use cellular to its fullest abilities, but to tie in satellite so that you can have a really, really great connection using multiple sources and not have to spend even as close to how much people are spending with just satellite alone. We can help people make systems that they never have to touch, that you can fully mount on a vehicle, and when you drive around, use a satellite and cellular to its fullest capabilities so that you get the most without ever having to touch something or deploy something. Different antennas that we've made over the years that helped us stay connected even when satellite wasn't even a thing. So if I could encourage you with just one thing, do a little bit of legwork. Check out some of the things out there. Take a look at the equipment itself, the antenna first, and then the equipment. If you have any questions on internet or anything, drop them in the comments below. I'll do my best to help. Of course, I'm gonna always have a little bit of bias towards InstaConnect, but if you have any questions about satellite, other systems out there, I'll be glad to help any way that I possibly can. So anyway, thanks so much for watching this video. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, bye-bye.